Just the aliens thought humanity had no fleet, then thousands of human ships emerged from the void. Ambassador Vex Tharion had 30 seconds to live, and she didn't know it yet. She stood on the observation deck of the Kaelith flagship. Second verdict, watching the human delegation's shuttle approach through a haze of orbital debris. And she smiled, the way her species smiled, when they believed they had already won. Behind her, 400 warships hung silent in the dark, their weapons cold, their crews confident. The humans had no fleet, every scan confirmed it. 3 colony worlds, a scattering of unarmed freighters, and a species too young to understand what was about to happen to it. She raised her hand to signal the boarding party. Then the void itself seemed to tear open. Light bled across the sensor arrays first. Not an explosion, but a wrongness, like a wound opening in the fabric behind the stars. The bridge crew of the second verdict would later swear the silence lasted only a heartbeat. It felt like a lifetime. And then space simply stopped being empty. Ships. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They didn't fly in from the edge of the system the way a fleet should. They arrived all at once. A wall of gray hulls unfolding out of nothing in perfect formation. Engines already burning, weapons already tracking. The Kaelith sensor officer screamed a number into the comm that made the bridge go silent. A number too large to be a mistake, too large to be anything but the truth. Vex Tharion's smile did not survive the sight, but none of this had begun that way. 6 months earlier, the planet Kaelara Prime turned slow and gold beneath its dying red sun, and in the deepest chamber of the Ashgate Spire, the Kaelith High Council debated the fate of a species they had never bothered to fear. "They are children," said Councillor Drath Molu, his voice a dry rasp through breathing membranes built for a thicker atmosphere. 3 worlds, no standing navy worth the name. Theirs largest warship carries fewer weapons than one of our patrol cutters, and, yet they built a station that intercepted our probe at the edge of their system," said Vex Tharion, youngest of the council and the one who had actually read the reports instead of merely approving them. "They detected a stealth-class scout. Nothing detects a stealth-class scout." Draeth waved this away with 3 long fingers. "A fluke, or luck. Humans are known for luck, not competence. The Kaelith had conquered 11 worlds in the last 2 centuries, not through overwhelming cruelty, but through overwhelming certainty. They arrived, they demonstrated force, and weaker species yielded rather than face annihilation. It had never failed. The Council saw no reason humanity would be different. Vex Tharion was not so sure. She had spent 3 years as a junior attaché on a trade world bordering human space, and what she remembered was not weakness. It was patience. Humans negotiated like they had all the time in creation, conceded small things easily, and never, not once, revealed what they actually valued. "I recommend a diplomatic approach first," she said. "Test their will before we commit force." The Council laughed, not unkindly. They had heard this caution before, from other species, about other doomed defenders. "Very well," said the first speaker, a withered elder named Krasik Vol, whose position at the head of the council came from surviving 4 wars, not from wisdom, though the Kaelith rarely made that distinction. "Send the delegation, let the humans surrender with dignity. And Ambassador, bring the fleet regardless. Some species need to see the blade before they understand the offer." That wasn't even the biggest miscalculation they would make. The human response came 11 days later, carried not by a warship but by a single unarmed courier vessel that requested. Politely, formally, in flawless Kaelith trade tongue, a meeting at neutral coordinates. The delegate who stepped off that courier was a woman named Elena Reyes, gray-haired, unhurried, dressed in a simple gray uniform with no visible rank insignia. She carried no weapons. She brought no guards. She sat across from Vex Tharion in the negotiation chamber, and folded her hands on the table like she had nowhere else in the universe to be. "You've come to conquer us," Elena said. Not a question. Vex Tharion considered lying. The Kaelith diplomatic doctrine favored obfuscation until the moment of demand. But something in the human's steady gaze made pretense feel foolish. "We've come to offer you the chance to submit before we're forced to conquer you," Vex said instead. "It is a mercy other species did not receive." "I see." Elena did not flinch, did not argue, did not perform the outrage the Council's briefings had predicted. "May I ask you something, Ambassador? Off the record, you may ask. How many worlds have you conquered this way? Arrive, threaten, wait for surrender. 11. And in 11 conquests, did any of those species ever detect your approach before you wanted them to? Vex Tharion hesitated. The honest answer was no, not once. The Kaelith stealth technology was the finest in the region. Undetectable by every scanning method known to the lesser powers they'd absorbed. No, she admitted. Elena Reyes almost smiled. We detected your scout ship 4 months ago. We've known you were coming since before this council meeting was scheduled. The ambassador suddenly understood. She had walked into a room where she was not the one holding power. The negotiations dragged for weeks, and the council grew impatient. Krasik Vol demanded results, Drath Molu demanded blood. But Vex Tharion, against every instinct her training had built into her, found herself listening more than dictating. Because every time she pushed, Elena Reyes gave ground so calmly, so completely without fear, that it felt less like negotiation and more like being humored. It was during the 9th session that Vex finally asked the question eating at her. You have no fleet. Our scans of your systems show nothing capable of resisting us. Why do you negotiate like you've already won? Elena studied her for a long moment. There was no cruelty in the human's expression, only something that looked almost like sorrow. Ambassador, may I tell you what happened to our species 400 years ago? Vex nodded, curious despite herself. We fought each other, nation against nation, ideology against ideology, until we nearly ended ourselves twice over. We built weapons that could crack a planet's crust and pointed them at our own cities. We learned, the hardest way a species can learn, that a fleet you can see is a fleet your enemy can plan around. Elena's voice did not rise, did not dramatize. So when we finally looked to the stars and understood other species were out there, species like yours, that conquer through fear of what's visible, we made a choice. What choice? We stopped building the fleet everyone could see. Everything changed in the next few seconds. Though Vex Tharion wouldn't understand how much for another 6 months. The council did not believe the warnings Vex brought back. Drath Molu called it a fear tactic from a desperate species, and even Krasik Vol, cautious old warhorse that he was, ultimately sided with the majority. The scans showed no fleet. The scans had never been wrong before. And so, with the diplomatic window declared closed, 400 Kaelith warships moved to make the demonstration the Council had always intended to make. A show of force above humanity's capital world. Close enough to shatter any illusion of safety, far enough to seem generous. Vex Tharion stood on the bridge of the second verdict as the fleet took position. And for reasons she could not fully name, she found herself hoping. Actually hoping. That Elena Reyes had been telling the truth. Because if the humans had lied about having no fleet, the Kaelith would win a war, but if they had told the truth about why they had no visible fleet, then every assumption the Council had built its empire on for 2 centuries, was about to break. The Kaelith sensor grid showed nothing. Empty space, 3 unarmed colony worlds. A scattering of civilian freighters going about ordinary business as if death itself hadn't arrived in orbit. The Council had made a terrible mistake, and they were about to learn how terrible. At the exact moment, the Kaelith fleet's weapons array, powered to full readiness, the human network, hidden for 400 years inside pockets of folded space that no scanning technology short of humanity's own could detect, dropped its concealment all at once. Thousands of ships did not approach, they simply stopped hiding. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons, unfolded from subspace pockets, tucked in the debris fields. The Kaelith had scanned 100 times and called empty. Carrier groups that had shadowed the Kaelith fleet's entire approach, silent and unseen for 11 days, revealed themselves, in perfect formation. And at the center of it all, a single vessel larger than anything the Kaelith had built in 2 centuries of conquest. A ship humanity called Vigilancy, humanity's answer to every empire that had ever mistaken patience for weakness. On the bridge of the second verdict, alarms shrieked as targeting locks bloomed across every display, thousands of them, more than the Kaelith fleet could track, let alone counter. Drath Molu's voice cracked over the calm. This is impossible. Nothing hides from Kaelith sensors. Nothing you've ever fought hid from Kaelith sensors. Vex Tharion said quietly, and for the first time in her career, she felt something colder than fear. She felt understanding. They weren't hiding from your sensors, counselor. They built ships that were never meant to be seen by anyone. Not us. Not each other. Not until the moment they chose. A single channel opened, cutting through every frequency the Kaelith fleet monitored. Elena Reyes's voice, unhurried as ever, filled the bridge. Ambassador Tharion, I told you we made a choice, 400 years ago, never to build a fleet the way other species build fleets. To threaten, to posture, to be seen and feared before a single word was spoken. You called it weakness. It was the opposite. Every ship in this formation has been ready for this moment, since before your grandparents were born. We did not want this war. We still don't. But we will not kneel to a demonstration, and we will not be conquered by a species that mistook our patience for the absence of teeth. Silence swallowed the bridge. Nobody knew what the human was hiding. And now the entire galaxy would remember. Krasik Vol gave the order to stand down 11 seconds later. It was, historians of both species would later agree, the fastest strategic reversal in Kaelith military history, and very possibly the only reason any of the 400 ships in that fleet returned home at all. There was no battle. There didn't need to be one. The thousands of human ships did not fire a single shot. They simply remained, an unbroken wall of proof that the old doctrine of fear and demonstration had finally met a species that understood the game better than its inventors did. In the weeks that followed, the treaty humanity offered was, by every measure the Kaelith could apply, generous. No reparations, no occupation, no demand for territory, only this, recognition as equals, and a promise, witnessed by every species now watching, in stunned silence across a dozen border worlds, that any fleet built to threaten humanity again, would meet the same wall of ships, every single time, without warning, without mercy, and without exception. Vex Tharion was the one who signed it, on behalf of a council that no longer entirely trusted its own certainty. Afterward, standing once more across from Elena Reyes in the same negotiation chamber where this had all begun, Vex asked the question that had haunted her since the moment the void had opened. Why? Show us at all. You could have let us believe we'd won, struck when we were vulnerable, ended the threat completely. Elena's expression softened, just slightly. The first real warmth Vex had seen from her in 6 months. Because we didn't build that fleet to conquer anyone, Ambassador, we built it so we'd never have to. There's a difference between having the power to end a war and choosing, every single time, to offer peace instead. We wanted you to see both. Vex Tharion looked out through the chamber's viewport, where in the far distance a single human ship held silent, patient watch, no longer hidden, no longer needing to be, and understood, at last, exactly what humanity had spent 4 centuries learning to become, not a threat, a promise, kept in silence until the moment silence was no longer required.